California Rural Legal Assistance, Inc. is an anti-poverty law firm that dismantles unjust systems through community lawyering in California's historically rural areas. We opened our doors 60 years ago with a community lawyering approach that built shared power with rural Californians who were priced out or denied by local law offices. And today, we continue to partner with communities to create innovative legal strategies that really push our society to prioritize human well-being. Let's explore some highlights from CRLA's first 60 years so you can see exactly what I mean. We opened our first offices in 1966, in the wake of civil rights victories and the declaration of a national war on poverty. Our founding attorneys saw an opportunity to pursue a really powerful idea: federally funded civil legal services that would turn justice for all into more than just a catchy phrase. By offering legal services at no cost to people who were priced out or denied by local law offices, CRLA took on that anti-democratic culture where people with wealth and privilege could access protection under the law, while those without wealth could not. And rural residents came to CRLA's offices with goals shared by so many Californians. They wanted to keep their families housed. They wanted to get paid wages they were owed for the work that they had already performed, ensure their children could get a good education, access health care, protect the environment to keep themselves and their families healthy. And with CRLA backing them up, low-wage workers, immigrants, people with disabilities, seniors, and other people whose limited economic means had for too long limited their legal access could now exercise their rights and could inform how laws are interpreted and enforced. And from the start, opponents labeled us as radical because we represented people whose marginalization they had enforced or they had exploited. And perhaps the most recognizable of those opponents was then Governor Ronald Reagan. In 1967, a class action brought by CRLA on behalf of veteran Harvey Morris holds Governor Reagan accountable for his unlawful defunding of Medi-Cal, the state's medical assistance program. The victory restores vital healthcare access for 1.5 million Californians with limited incomes. Governor Reagan then tried to defund CRLA, and we found ourselves at the center of a national conversation about that importance of civil legal services. After federal officials across the political spectrum affirmed our practice and our funding, we continued to represent rural Californians as they fought unjust systems. In 1970, pregnant farm workers represented by CRLA seek to end the use of the pesticide DDT and protect their and their babies' health. Their case leads to a nationwide DDT ban. Salinas Valley families work with CRLA to stop the widespread practice of placing Spanish-speaking children in special education classes. This case sets an important legal precedent to ensure California public schools are more accessible for all children. And one of the top goals rural communities brought to CRLA when we opened our doors was a ban on El Cortito, the crippling short-handled hoe, a goal we accomplished in a landmark 1975 case. Farm worker back injuries drop a dramatic 34%. As we entered our second decade, we had emerged as a leader in the field of civil legal services, and rural California communities were setting precedents that benefited people across our state and beyond. But a growing conservative legal movement had also gained ground in their focus on rolling back the progress of the civil rights movement, a development that was reflected in federal funding cuts and limitations on civil legal services. These cuts motivated us to bring even more creativity to bear in our advocacy, including amplifying rural voices so that they could shape legislation that could promote stable, thriving communities statewide. California workers struggling with unemployment win back $27 million in benefits because of a successful CRLA lawsuit. Pesticide companies must test the harmfulness of their products to human beings after California enacts the CRLA-sponsored Birth Defect Prevention Act. And California creates the CRLA-sponsored Housing Trust Fund, which annually turns $20 million in offshore oil taxes into funds for low-income housing. In our third decade, CRLA brings the perspectives of Californians priced out of legal representation to bear on issues of national importance, from immigration to reproductive justice to environmental racism. CRLA advocates persuade the state Supreme Court that piece rate harvest workers employed by growers as share farmers are not independent contractors. The court rules that these workers are indeed employees entitled to the full spectrum of rights afforded Californian workers, including wage protection. California women who rely on healthcare services from nonprofit family planning clinics see access restored after CRLA successfully challenges Governor Deukmejian's authority to cut $20 million in funding. Residents fighting the construction of a toxic waste incinerator in their rural community work with CRLA to file the nation's first suit ever charging environmental racism. Our fourth decade opened with congressional attacks on safety net programs, echoing cuts that had already been underway here in California. Many more people across California became increasingly precarious or fell further into poverty as post-NAFTA upheaval in immigration and labor continue, and the electricity market deregulation leads to an energy crisis and soaring utility bills. Significant funding cuts and federal restrictions on civil legal services resulted in major downsizing at CRLA and closure of our Sacramento office, but it did not stop us from leading on with important advocacy. After the Labor Commissioner says expensive court proceedings are the only option for California workers fighting employer wage theft, CRLA and our clients prevail before the state Supreme Court, which confirms the Labor Commissioner's responsibility to handle claims, ensuring all workers have more accessible options to uphold their rights. Longtime residents of downtown Stockton retained CRLA to successfully fight a city plan that would demolish their affordable housing while skirting the city's responsibility to pay for relocation. A Latina farm worker opens the door for others to pursue justice when she engages CRLA to file the industry's first ever sexual harassment case, resulting in a $1.8 million settlement. Our fifth decade brought hard-fought landmark victories for workers, but also the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession, which resulted in poverty rates approaching the 1960s level that had prompted the war on poverty. And during this period, we developed new partnerships and strategies to fight predatory lending practices and make sure Californians had every possible tool to keep their families housed. We also piloted new service delivery models to support people navigating changes to healthcare access following the passage of the Affordable Care Act. And we initiated legal practice areas to support the goals of LGBTQ+ Californians and unincorporated communities. Agricultural workers retained CRLA to fight wage theft and secure an important victory for all California workers when the state Supreme Court delivers a unanimous decision that clarifies employer liability and expands workers' recourse to recover unpaid wages. During the drought of 2007 through 2009, the first to prompt a statewide emergency declaration, unincorporated rural communities turned to CRLA to see what can be done about water quality and water access. Successful litigation filed by CRLA ensures that the state of California develops and distributes a safe drinking water plan. And in response to rural families' concerns, CRLA held rural safe school summits across the state to raise awareness about anti-LGBTQ+ bullying, students' legal protections, and schools' responsibilities to ensure a safe learning environment for all students. In 2016, CRLA celebrated our 50th anniversary. The following year brought a new federal administration with policy changes that caused complete upheaval in agriculture, immigration, climate, healthcare, and other areas that are vital to California communities. And the new administration also called for eliminating funding for civil legal services. Nevertheless, we persisted. Together with rural Californians, we secured important legal victories for immigrants, for workers, for public school students, for people navigating homelessness. We built our expertise in disaster recovery and climate impact on workplace safety, as California's rural areas were disproportionately bearing the brunt of 9 of the 10 largest documented wildfires in state history. This period also saw a lot of innovation in how we deliver legal services as we faced the COVID-19 pandemic, and we tried innovative approaches like clean slate clinics and name and gender marker correction clinics. The Kern County Public School students, represented by CRLA, uphold students' rights to sue the state superintendent and the California Department of Education when those offices fail to intervene in school districts' discriminatory discipline practices. Capping off more than a decade of advocacy to address widespread violations in California's dairy industry, dairy worker Jose Arias and his CRLA advocates further strengthen California workers' rights when a federal appellate court rules in Mr. Arias' favor, finding that retaliation provisions apply to any person and do not require that a defendant be the plaintiff's employer. Thousands of H-2A farm workers triumph over 3 major agricultural employers, securing a $2.2 million settlement and drawing attention to potential for increased employer abuse as the U.S. Department of Labor's H-2A temporary worker program triples within a decade. Prompted by pregnant agricultural workers concerned about pesticide exposure, CRLA works with EDD, with the Employment Development Division, to clarify the disability standard so all pregnant California workers navigating workplace hazards now have clear guidance to access state disability insurance as early in pregnancy as their doctor advises. Today, as we reflect on our 60th anniversary in 2026, celebration feels complicated. Federal immigration raids are devastating families and undermining communities across California. Supreme Court rulings and executive policy changes are eroding our constitutional rights. The legal tools we used for many of our landmark victories are now less effective. More and more people nationwide are feeling the impact of unjust systems that CRLA clients have been fighting for decades. And their options to fight back are at risk too, as the current administration seeks to again cut funding for civil legal services. But if 60 years of community lawyering has taught us anything, it's that we are stronger together. We draw hope from our long experience working with rural communities and individuals who insisted on justice in spite of the many, many barriers in their way. Their insights and their vision push us to create legal strategies that defend civil rights now, but also create new possibilities for the future. Possibilities that can turn protests and resistance sparked by injustice into a legal system that actually prioritizes human well-being and a just and equitable future where all communities prosper. Because despite what some would like us all to believe, the future is not yet determined. Of course, it's hard work to create something new, but you don't have to eliminate every last pest or weed before planting seeds. You just have to make sure enough of the conditions are in place for those seeds to take root and for those seeds to grow.